Okay, you went mute, Amanda, but so welcome back, everybody. Next session is on a successful program manager and management with Amanda Roberts and James Purswell. So I'll turn it over to them for some introductions.
Hey, thanks, Matt, and thanks to everybody who is in 581. What an amazing week that we have all had. I know many of us are federal employees. I imagine we've got some state employees and others here. And so what we've been tasked with, and I see so many fabulous people on this in this class. I know that it's been a good community group. I see so many of our peeps from BLM. I see our COFMIS peeps. I see just a whole bunch of wonderful folks in the room. So we're really glad to see you. Let's see. I'm getting a little bit nervous. We are talking to black screens. I know that it is Friday at 2:20, 14:20, if you're talking fire language. And you all are probably tired and ready for the virtual week to end. We're here to talk a little bit about how to run a successful fire organization. But before we do that, we'll do introductions of ourselves. Hello, I'm Amanda Roberts. I work as the district manager for the Prineville District BLM. We're about a 120 person organization organized in 2 field offices. I manage 1.85 million acres across 13 million acres. And so we have a whole bunch of neighbors. And then we have a fire program that I will let James describe here in a minute. But before I do so, just for a little bit of background on myself, because I think bringing your whole self to work when you can is a critical component of running a fire organization. So let's see, I'm a district manager, right? So in that way, I work as a supervisor. I also have 2 small kids. I interchangeably refer to them as chaos and joy. And so I come home to them just about every evening unless I'm traveling or out managing a fire. Sometimes when they think that I work in fire, they think that I have a really fabulous job and I wear white boots and carry a Pulaski, and I have to explain to my children that that's not what I do when I work in fire. I'm also a daughter. I've got 3 parents, 1 in memory care and 2 in assisted living. So these are all the things that I bring with me when I come to work, among many others. My background, I started in fire as my first federal job. I was a hotshot with the Pleasant Valley Hotshots many years ago. And then after about 5 years of being a hotshot, I left, went to graduate school in organizational development. So my background is actually in people. I'm not an ologist or a specialist, but my background is in people. And with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to James to introduce himself and describe our fire program for a little bit.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm James Purswell. I'm the preparedness side AFMO for the Prineville District BLM. Amanda alluded to it. Our fire program is interagency in nature. Specifically on the BLM side, we have north of 50 personnel at peak staffing. We run 11 engines in coordination with our partners on the Ochiko and Deschutes National Forest. We've got multiple duty stations and tight partnerships, which we'll get into here in a minute with those around us. We also have a pretty robust fuels program that has increased in size and scale over the past probably 4 or 5 years. And then I guess a little background on myself. I was primarily a hotshot for the first 15 plus minus years of my career in the Southwest on the Gila National Forest. And then I transitioned up here with the Redmond Interagency Hotshot crew. When I expired out of that, I kind of got the ultimatum from the home front. So to achieve family balance, I moved on to an AFMO position on the Umatilla National Forest, zone FMO on the Mount Hood, and came over here as a field specialist just recently into the AFMO role with the Prineville BLM. For myself, I live in Redmond, Oregon with my wife and 2 5-year-old children.
Awesome. Thanks, James. I can see from the names and from the roster what folks day jobs are. I know we're in fire. Remember, we're talking a little bit about how to run a successful fire organization. I imagine many of you have different roles with regard to how you interact with your fire organizations as you're working on this agency administrator class. Think about what questions you might have for us. Either feel free to interrupt by typing something into the chat. We are monitoring the chat, or feel free to raise your hand. We're happy to talk about that. When we were thinking about, and we happen to be in the same room, so we're using one mic. So just let us know. We wanted you to be able to see our faces. So we should be able to pivot as needed. When we thought about what does it take to run a successful fire organization, there's three things that we really thought about that we wanted to talk about. One is integrations. And integrations might mean different things to different people, but what it means for the context that we're talking about is integrations means literally integrating your field staff and your organization, the folks who are anything for me from my administrative staff to the 2 field offices who run our resources, our biologists, our archaeologists, our geologists, our plant biologists, and then all of our fire organization. We found that the better we could integrate those 2 organizations, the better it is for the whole, meeting the mission of our whole organization, right? So that is number 1, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Number 2 is relationships, relationships, relationships. And in many ways, relationships have a lot to do with integrations, right? It's getting to know one another and understand what each other's needs are, both organizationally, and I would venture to say as well as personally, because how can you be a successful program manager if you don't understand what's going on for your people? That's my perspective. And then third, oh my goodness. Oh, it's setting direction, setting a clear direction and being in clear communication with your fire management staff about what that direction is, because that direction has to dovetail perfectly with what the mission of your organization is, right? And so for the BLM, and I venture to say the Forest Service, if you just change a couple words, the mission of the BLM is to sustain the health, diversity, and productivity of public lands, or America's forests, if you're work for the Forest Service, health, diversity, and productivity of America's public lands for the use and enjoyment of current and future generations. And so when I think about what that means for our fire folks, they're pulling in the same direction that everybody else is, and communicating what it means to pull in that same direction is a key component of managing a really successful fire organization. And so, James, I'm going to look to you for a little bit to talk a little bit about what integrating the fire organization with the field organization means to you from the FMO side of the house.
Yeah, so I think for me, integrating with the non-fire portions of the district unit, it's more about establishing, kind of dovetailing into our next topic, but relationships, establishing those relationships early, building the trust. I think you need to be a bit of a ruthless recruiter when it comes to managing a fire program and finding people's strengths. For when you do get extremely busy, those lightning bust events, those recovery events. I know for myself, I learned a lot in this past fire season, how to lean into some of our line officers really heavy, and some of our specialists for the recovery work, everything from suppression repair to the bear effort.
Okay. So can I see a show of hands of how many folks who are in the agency administrator role? So I'd call it the line officer role or the decision-making role from the kind of land management perspective. Raise your hand if you started in fire or have ever held a formal role in fire. It may be hard for me to see everybody. Just give me a show of hands if you've started in the fire role. So I know, for instance, Mike Millay, it plays a role as Reader Reef. That wasn't his original job, right? Lisa Clark, who's one of my field managers, she started in fire, much like myself. We actually think that's kind of fun. So did Holly Jukes, who's the forest supervisor for the Deschutes National Forest and one of the other managers of COET. Oh my goodness, I'm seeing no hands. Did nobody start in fire, or is this just a Zoom function for me?
There's quite a few hands up.
I think I see a different screen. So thank you, Lisa, for telling me.
Maybe like
So,
8.
okay. So I wonder, I don't know if it's real or not. I think Lisa has a soft spot for all of our fire organization. I have a soft spot for our fire organization. Whether or not that's because we started in fire, I don't know. When I asked folks what makes for good management of a fire organization, people said relationships, right? And so I think it's about understanding what the culture is of the folks in your fire unit. I think the step I would take a little bit further is sometimes managers, and this may be applicable to those of you who didn't start in fire or haven't played a significant role in fire yet, is that sometimes there can be a little bit of a culture difference between our firefighters and our primary fire personnel and the rest of the organization, right? For better or for worse, sometimes that cultural difference exists. I would say that connecting with your fire staff and doesn't come with an embossed invitation, right? There are cultural differences, and those are things that we have to get over sometimes. There can be a perception from the fire side, and help me out, James, that agency administrators, this is my word, can be a little bit needy and prima donna-like. While that might be true, there's a lot we're looking out for. And so there can be differences of perceptions about the roles that we play on both sides. And so the best way to knock down those perceptions is to get to know one another and to understand the root causes of why an agency administrator might be asking for something, and building those relationships on the side or before the season exists, right? Or before the season gets to a place of intensity. And so I would just say, my advice to agency administrators, new agency administrators, line officers, or people who supervise non-fire personnel is find all the ways you can to connect with your fire folks, invite them to join. And Lisa, I'll look to you at some of the successes that the Deschutes field office has had with connecting with fire folks. But the more you can create those connections, the better. James, do you have anything to describe on where we've had success there?
Yeah, I can speak maybe best being into a new role last summer on the preparedness side of the house. It was nice to have a relationship specifically with Lisa, one of our agency administrators from previous work as a fuel specialist, seeing her participate in IDT and understand some of the risks and challenges from that AA and line officer role. So I built that comfort out quite a bit. So when we had challenging circumstances throughout the fire season, I had a high level of comfort coming to Lisa, and she helped coach me in integrating in our other field manager on the Central Oregon field office side. So really beneficial for myself.
Hey, Lisa, do you have anything to add right now? Or does anybody else have anything to add on when those successful connections have been made and how you've made them?
Yeah, we've done a couple things. One, we recognize sometimes that people who start in fire might not want to stay in fire. And so we try to find ways, if they want to spend a little time with our botany staff or learn how an interdisciplinary team works for doing NEPA, or maybe going out with a wildlife biologist for a day. So recognizing that not only are they developing themselves in fire, they might be developing themselves to go somewhere else within the agency. And so that just kind of helps build the agency as a whole. Some of the other things that we'll do for just kind of helping create more of a seamless workforce in the summer is just not just inviting them to potlucks, but trying to figure out ways that we can get to know them. Also including and inviting our fire staff when we have team work days and things like that. So we can get to know them as more than just a group of people who come in dressed in their Nomex and maybe sit in their own corner of meetings and things like that. Help them be a part of our office. And yes, I see somebody on there, candy works too. Pizza as well.
Dane, thanks for offering that opportunities for cross training on both sides. I think one of the next things that I'd like to talk about as far as integrating is, and this can be a little bit of a question answer session. A show of hands of if you supervise non-fire personnel who either work on IMTs or work as collateral duty for fire. Okay, I saw a couple hands flash. Yeah, this is a place where I see a lot of questions about what's the priority. Is the priority getting the work done for your home unit and having your staff who you rely on to get that work done for that home unit? Or is it to send those folks on fires time after time after time again? And that's a question that only you can answer as a supervisor. And one thing I'd like to say is this summer, the Prineville District hosted 13 complex incident management teams. We had a banner fire year, or a fire season that lasted 4 months, with always a minimum one complex team on the district during that 4-month period, with a handful of type 3 teams coming and going as well. And if you've ever been in a situation as an agency administrator, the button that we get to push, right, is when we are no longer able to handle a fire on our own with our own resources, we either call in a type 3 team or a complex incident management team, right? This summer, I was in the position where at least twice we called for a complex incident management team and we couldn't get one, because we were in PL5 and no one else was in the barn, and we had no other resources available to us. And if you've ever been in that situation, it can be crushing and really hard to move forward as you're trying to actually support your home unit, right? And your home unit firefighters, and we're asking for relief and help, and that in the short term, there was no relief in sight. And that kind of frames for me the need to ensure that our personnel are cross-trained and can support IMTs. I think it's a sacrifice sometimes for the district to give up folks to work as planning section chiefs or medical unit leaders, or we have a lot of folks who have gone to work as Reed and Reefs, right? Not just for our home unit, but going to support other BLM districts across the country when the time is needed. Sometimes it's about letting people go and be drivers, right? Or support our dispatch centers, because goodness knows our dispatch centers need a whole lot of help. And so I think it's all about the collaborative effort. And start those conversations now with your staff who are interested in supporting IMTs or taking on a role in fire, and figuring out how best you might be able to support that. Understand that it's a negotiation and can always be a two-way conversation about how those staff might go and support a team while also supporting their home unit duties and home unit work. But I think times have changed. People's priorities have changed, and the management of an IMT roster has gotten significantly more complex than it used to be. So creating shared positions on a team, I think teams know this right now, but I think it can create a lot of questions for supervisors and line officers on how best to support teams in the off season. But I think it goes to Zane's comment about offering opportunities for cross-training. I'm interested in if there's any other comments from the room about supporting collateral duty fire, because I think that that's one way that we can best manage a fire organization, is by offering our support when times are needed. And then I'll just say the flip side is true. We ask our firefighters to support our district offices when we're not in fire, looking for two-sided communication. So James, I'll look to you if there's anything you have to add. And then I'll look to the group if there's anything anyone in the room has to add.
No, I think just to echo what you said, it's important that the fire personnel do integrate with the district, support, prop up project work. And again, it just really gives opportunity to build that background and trust when it comes to a time of need from the the non-primary fire to support the fire program.
Yeah. Any questions so far? Any suggestions so far? Any supervisors who want to say like, man, oh man, I just can't have my planning and environmental coordinator go on 5 14-day assignments all summer long because it impacts our projects at home. And help me, anybody, if you see hands up that I can't see, please.
This is Josh Chapman. The one I would share is we have timber sale administrators and harvest inspectors that are needed to implement timber sale contracts that are still ongoing. And so, yeah, we have those folks who are primarily assigned to administering timber sale contracts, and they're our only folks to be able to do so. We have held them back from being able to participate on fire just to support that critical mission.
Yeah, we absolutely have critical missions, right? My FMO is an incident commander in a complex team, right? And there may be a time when I say he can't go and support that team, right? I haven't had to say that yet, but we do have the discretion to say that when we need to, while understanding the greater good, right, of what's needed at any given time. And it's up to supervisors to make that decision. And again, I encourage those conversations early. Brian Howell, I see your hand up.
I think it was still up from when you talked about firefighters.
I think I'm not seeing the hands up. So thank you for that, Brian.
I'm listening, learning.
You're great. Lena, who came to support us as an incident management business specialist this summer. Go ahead, Lena.
I feel like I'm part of Kaufmas now.
I appreciate that.
Good to see you guys. One thing that was a lesson learned for me as in my new role with my peeps this year was setting expectations on assignments. And so this year and at the end of last year, we started having those conversations. I will, you can go out on 2 assignments. After that, it's a conversation. And then, I gave them the expectation too, that if our home unit's burning and we're crying for resources here, we're going to ask you to stay here and help out before you can go out with the team, because we need to take care of our own people. Everyone's been really responsive positively to that, because we're having that honest conversation and setting expectations. So just wanted to add that in.
Super helpful. I really think that the setting expectations and doing it now in January and February makes a really big difference for the future. And so have those relationships in place, have those conversations early. I see Cassidy's comment in the chat. There is a pull, and it's pretty rough to ignore the things we have to take care of at home. I appreciate that, Cassidy. Thank you. And Jill, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, it's nice when we get people, and it come from a dispatch perspective, coming in and getting just a little bit of training or cross training like in April before it really gets busy. It's super hard when, everybody wants to help in August, but like we don't have the time to train them. So supporting training for those people with militia responsibilities or that want to participate in fire before it's there. And even if it's not full on, the true NWCD training, but even just letting them go and participate in type 3s in some capacity before it really gets busy and you're really needing to pull on them. Just going to mention that.
Yeah, I think it's about planning, and I think it's about relationships, and those things matter a whole lot, right? And conversations, having honest conversations early about what's needed. All right, I think the last thing I was going to talk about is setting direction and then stepping in when needed for managing a fire organization. So there is a lot of, and James, help me out if there's anything you'd like to add, just let me know. There's a lot of complexity in our fire organization that isn't obvious if you've come up through kind of a regular, or I don't know what is traditional anymore, agency administrator or line officer role. There are agreements, there are qualifications that unless you're in the fire world can be hard to understand. And so understanding all of the regulations and components that are required of our firefighters and fire staff is helpful, in leaning into that, I think is a really important component of understanding your fire organization and then leading your fire organization. And I would say with that, once you understand those pieces, the next step is to lean in and make sure you're paying attention to it. I don't know if you've ever had a boss, long before I came to the Bureau of Land Management, I had a supervisor that rated me all fives on my EPAP, just straight fives, and didn't ever really have a conversation with me about what was important or how my work was. And as an employee, that actually didn't feel very good to me, right? Because he had no idea what work I was actually working on, and that there was no oversight and no understanding of the impact I was having in my job. And so, as strange as it might sound, I didn't care very much or think that that boss cared very much for me, even though I got great ratings, all right, on my performance plan. I think it's a little bit the same way. I think one of the best ways we can show love and share love to our fire folks and fire staff is by really understanding the complexity of what they do. And in order to do that, sometimes we have to have a lot of understanding of what they do. And then I think it's worthwhile to ask hard questions about what the priorities are, asking questions about how they're integrated with the rest of our staff, and understanding and listening when they have the answers, right? I think, I don't know if my FMO and that James would really want me to be as involved as I am, but my job is to ask a lot of questions, because I think with asking questions, we can better set a direction together. And in setting that direction together, show the care that we've got for our fire folks. I don't know what your perspective is on involvement from line officers and the best way they can be involved.
Yeah, I think you bring up a lot of good points, and I'm trying to think how to phrase it from a fire manager perspective. And I would stress the importance of really understanding agreements, operating plans, and qualification standards, so that when an agency administrator does defer to your expertise, you can help navigate that process in short order. They are expecting you to be the subject matter expert at that point in time. So you really have to have a thorough understanding of those plans and agreements to distill it down and make a decision when it's critical and needed.
Thanks, James. Ryan, I see you've got your hand up. Is that on purpose?
Yeah. So as an FMO, right, you're also part of either forest leadership, district leadership. And so how you as an FMO choose to engage with helping lead out at your unit will go a long way with those relationships. If you want to be passive and just worry about fire management, that will show how your relationship with the rest of the staff and the district or forest interact with you. So I think that is critical, and I think at times is forgotten. So that's all I got to say.
Wait, I'm not letting you off the hook yet, Ryan.
Go ahead.
Like, can you describe like one or two concrete ways you do that? Like, how do you do that with your forest leadership? Like, what is something that you do that helps you move that along or increase that collaboration?
I think being an active member of either your district leadership or your forest leadership, right? Being part of the safety committees, wellness committees, employee associations, encouraging your staff to be a part of that also. Not just think I'm an engine captain and this is what I do. No, you're an engine captain on a ranger district, and this is how you're going to support that ranger district or that BLM unit or whatever, wherever you work. But you set that expectation as an FMO. And I do think that you get a lot more support as you and your staff in fire management support the units.
may sound petty. I know the name of every engine captain who works for me in BLM, right? We've just hired a whole bunch of assistants, so I'm learning the assistants' names as of this year. But I think the better you can get to know folks as individuals, I don't give them direction, right? That works through the chain of command. But as you can get to know the folks who work for you by name and what's important to them, I think it also communicates some of that stuff. I'd like to sit here and tell you I'm an expert at running a fire organization, right? And that's why I was asked to be here. And I don't think that's true, right? And I can tell you that because about a year and a half ago, we got our federal employee viewpoint survey results. Maybe it was 2 years ago now. And it was the first year that we had had enough of our fire folks respond that they had their own breakout. So if you work for the state or not for the feds, every year the OPM, Office of Personnel Management, sends out something called the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey. And it's given to us. Forest Service does it a little differently, but for BLM, we do it every year. And what I found on that survey, when I looked at the breakout of our fire folks, is our fire folks weren't happy. They felt like they didn't have any autonomy. They didn't have the leadership that they wanted. They needed better communication, right? And so we had to take a pause and kind of look at that. And we had to dive in a little bit more and ask questions about what was working, what wasn't working. Many of our fire folks are at a location that's not at our district office. So we had to figure out how we could better integrate that a little bit and have conversations about what is working and what's not working. One piece that came out of that we're still, everything's an evolution, right? Everything's a work in progress. But we learned our captains who were supervising 7 people or so without assistant captains had to be doing all of the quick time training and the travel training and the oversight of a lot of the bureaucratic stuff. So one of the things we did was we integrated a more robust new employee orientation to take some of that bureaucratic workload off of those first line supervisors and also create a little bit of a better standard for us here in the district for how we achieve that. So we're still working on it, right? There's still some things that we can do to improve our fire organization. And I would just say it's like a two-way conversation, right? It's got to go back and forth and back and forth. I know that there are a few other FMOs on the class. Lonnie, you're one of them. I wonder if anybody else has insight on what you think from the FMO perspective makes for a successful relationship with your line officers or agency administrators. And somebody else help me if you see hands and I don't.
Yeah, good afternoon, Amanda. Yeah, successful relationships, you got to be available. You got to establish and make that dedicated time with those parties so that, in the event when the smoke is in the air, you know each other, you know how to operate, and it'll really help you for navigating stressful situations.
Yeah, thanks for that, Lonnie. Was that somebody else chiming in? Maybe not yet.
I was just gonna see, I didn't see any hands up, so.
Okay, thank you. I have the feeling we're toward the end of the day after a really long week. I think, what questions do folks have, or what concrete suggestions might you have to share of what makes for great management of a fire organization? I know, this is the end of the day part where no one wants to speak, right?
It might be that.
James, do you have anything else that you'd like to add?
I think having seen his name in the crowd, I'd like to call on Mike Moore if you feel comfortable coming up on camera. I was going to try to distill one of your quotes about building relationships prior to the fire season, but with you in the crowd, I'd feel a little uncomfortable. Maybe, are you comfortable sharing that, Mike? Are you still on?
Yeah. Hey, Timothy. Thanks, man. Yeah, I think the quote you're getting at is preseason is the time for handshakes and introductions. So when the fire's going over the hill, it's homie hugs and high fives. Is that the one you're getting at, Jim?
That's the one I was getting at, and I felt like I, do a good enough job distilling it down, but with you in the crowd, it was better coming from you. So thank you, Mike.
Yeah, no, I think it's just important for if you can find that time. I always like Friday mornings or Friday sometime when that line officer isn't crazy busy and just put your feet up, have a cup of coffee, talk about life a little bit and build that relationship and kind of seems to be the time that's available to just talk about program, talk about district or whatever it needs to be.
Yeah. Marlon.
Yeah, I think part of the success and key is the integration in the programs. I mean, historically, you may look back 20, 30 years ago and a lot of the fire world was kind of cliquey. I've seen that change a lot, but just from my point of view, supervising in forestry and silviculture, I try real hard in the office to integrate the two and make sure on both sides they have opportunities off season to work across boundaries, help us with each other to accomplish our goals, whether it's on the forestry side or on the fuel side. So we get to know each other on a personal level. And same thing like on an incident management team. I think those teams that are really successful have a really good family atmosphere. We all have our jobs to do out on the IMTs, but we're all in it together, to get our goals done. We kind of put down some of those boundaries, and we really feel more like a family when we see each other out in the IMT world on an incident, and trying to build that same concept in the office. I think really helps to see people as people and just not as their job duty descriptions.
Marlon. So I'll just ask, what you kind of mentioned it, but what is a concrete thing that you do to build those relationships?
Maybe coincidentally at not on the IMT incident management team world, we have preseason, mid, postseason. We have a lot of food gatherings at the end where everybody pitches in together, even during the middle of the assignment if we can. Some just to take a break, to sit down together, share some food, break some bread together. We do the same thing in the office. We have monthly breakfasts every first Thursday of every month. We have an all-employee family breakfast where we cook bacon and eggs and have full-service breakfast that all the supervisors and leadership team provides for all our employees, where we get to see each other just outside of our job duties to visit and see people and reward them on a regular basis. And we refer to ourselves often to having a family meeting instead of an all-employee meeting each month.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Lisa, I see you came on camera. Do you have something to add?
Yeah, I mean, Marlon hit on it actually quite a bit there. Just thinking about when we had conflicts last summer, I think in a lot of cases it was when ego couldn't get checked at the door. And people kind of came in with maybe feeling that positional power or coming in with a different intent of how they were going to work together. And so Marlon said it there, we're all there. We have the same objective, really. Maybe we get to that end goal in a slightly different way, but we have that same objective. So coming together, setting that ego aside, whether you're a forest soup, a district manager, whatever that is, we're all at the table together.
Important. One thing that I'd like to add is I would encourage everyone in their agency administrator journey. Lisa reminded me, or someone reminded me earlier, how this class for many organizations is what prepares you to be an agency administrator. And so in about, I don't know, another hour or so, you all are going to be fully prepared from a formal perspective to be agency administrators, right? And if you were like me, right after you took this class, you had an uh-oh moment of, I'm responsible for what? And there's so much I just realized I don't know. And so with that, and Mike Crawford put it in the chat, patience and grace. Allow everyone the opportunity to learn, right? The agency administrator that I was 4 years ago is really different from the agency administrator that I am now. And boy, do I wish that some of the conversations that I had 4 years ago with some of our partners or my FMOs or other entities, boy, I wish I could take some of the things I said back and do it a little bit differently and do it with the experience that I have now. And so as you work through this journey and as you continue to communicate with your fire staff, just give one another patience and grace. And also grant everyone the opportunity to learn and then grow. And remember that even if you met with the same person or the same partner, the same FMO or the same counterpart on a fire a couple years ago, they may be a different agency administrator or fire AFMO or FMO now, because we all should be afforded the opportunity to learn from how we behaved in the years past to bring those experiences forward as we become more seasoned agency administrators. Amanda Hoffman, I see your hand up.
Hi, I just wanted to share something. So I work in Western Oregon where we really don't have fire programs. We're relying on ODF and then we're relying on the teams. And you know, it's really nice when you have your own fire program and you can be building those relationships on the off season. But when I either bring in a team or when I go to help another area on a team, I may or may not know that team, right? And so you have to figure out how to build relationships fast. And I had I feel really bad that I was like that years old when I learned this because it seems so obvious, but I found myself on a team last year where they were just like hitting their stride and being amazing, and everything they did was like spot on. And I found myself giving a lot of compliments. And it was amazing how when I needed it, like that team really like circled around me and helped me out. And it was just a good reminder. We've got people out there that, you know, making sacrifices in their personal lives to do a hard job and getting very little thanks for it. And taking that moment to, you know, thank you is one thing, but like, I saw you do the specific thing really well is another, that really personal moment with people on the team. And that's a new goal for me, is to make sure I'm doing that on every fire that I was, because I think it made the difference in my relationship with that team during a couple of really hard situations.
Awesome. I love it. I think it's also a key component of the culture change that I've seen happen from the 25 or more years ago that I worked in fire directly to the kinds of organizations that I see now and want to be a part of, right? We get to be the change that we want to see. And one of the things my boss says is come to work with an unconditional positive regard for your colleagues. Listen to that. Come to work with an unconditional positive regard for your colleagues and see what happens, right? I think it's about what Marlon's saying in the chat, treating people as they are and like as the whole individual, right? We started, James and I deliberately started this conversation telling you that what we bring is sometimes, you know, when we go on fires, right? There's guilt for not being there for your spouse you're leaving behind, taking care of the kids, or perhaps they're taking care of another loved one, a family member, or otherwise when you are leaving to go away and that stress comes at you. I sometimes joke about all of those things that come at us, having to find the pet sitters and the dog sitters because you have an unexpected fire assignment. Those things weigh on us as individuals, and the more that we can do in our work environment to support the whole person, I think is going to help. I also think it's going to contribute to the kind of work environment where we're supported and can be real when the stress of fire management or the stress of our own workload comes after us. Because we all know that sometimes those mental health issues are becoming more and more prevalent in fire. And I think it's everyone's responsibility to look out for one another. So in summary, and are we too early, Matt? Do you need, and we'll take any questions that you've got. So if anyone has questions, go ahead and put them in the chat and I'll give you my summary. But Matt, do you need us to fill, or would it just be helpful to give folks a longer break?
You're doing really good on time. So you got a few more minutes if you got more stuff.
Okay. We welcome any questions that you all might have. We know that fire organizations are really different, but kind of to summarize, and I'm going to turn around. Oh, there you go, Shannon. Good question. Summarizes integrate, right? Between your fire organization and your non-fire organization. Bring those people together in all the ways that you can. Have the potlucks, have the Friday morning coffees, find something that works, because connecting does not come with an embossed invitation. You have to do the work to create that integration. Second is relationships. Spend the off season to get those relationships in place and to do a little bit of connecting. Learn who your people are and who your go-tos might be when it's not stressful, so that when the stressful times come, you can have those conversations. And then the third one is set a clear direction together with your fire leadership on what you want your organization to look like. James, anything else that I missed, or anything that you want to add in closing?
No, I appreciate that you're bringing up these relationships, and these integrations don't come with an embossed invitation. I think those take a lot of effort on the front end, and just because you have an established relationship, as we grow in our careers, you know, those things, just like any relationship, take a lot of care and feeding and time and effort on everyone's part. So invest the time to maintain the relationships you have as well.
Dan, I see your question. So Dan Cleveland's question is, if you were to have the opportunity to build a program from infancy, what priorities would place first? For myself, and so James, you think about that from your perspective, I would say that my number one priority in my organization is the health and happiness of the team. Which isn't necessarily the health and happiness of any one individual, but it's how we work together as an organization. And safety is embedded in that, hopefully first. So I would say being clear with one another that my expectations are that we look out for one another, and the health of the whole team would be something that I would prioritize always. If that's not what you meant by establishing a program from infancy, let me know. Because we can adapt. I can adapt the answer to that if that wasn't the right question. James, do you have anything to add to that question? What would you put in place first as a priority?
With a growing program, I think all the above that you've said, but also resiliency, just a program that's taking care of the people first, and resilient to change and growth within that, able to adapt to new circumstances, and having been a part of several growing programs, there's definitely growing pains to it. So a resilient workforce that's looking after one another.
Other questions? We've got a couple more minutes. No. I also welcome input in the chat on if you think you have something that has worked as a really solid fire organization for you. I think we can all learn from it, right? We're always in a continued state of learning. So how we might learn from one another. We also, by the way, have a all employee breakfast on Wednesday we're really looking forward to. So bring on the bacon.
Awesome.
Oh, go ahead, Matt. Thanks.
No, that's good. Maybe I'll make a trip down to Prineville.
Come on over.
Anything else for Amanda or James? Okay. Well, we really appreciate you joining us today and helping out with this section. So thanks. With that, we'll take about a 10-minute break. So let's everybody be back by, I think that'd be 15:20. So let's shoot for 15:20 back in the room.
And good luck to everyone in your future firefighting efforts.
Good seeing you, Bubba.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, James.